Okay, I think some people are joining us on Facebook Live. Let's see. Have myself muted. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So for those who are joining us on Facebook Live, if you don't mind sharing with your followers so people can follow us and see what we're talking about during this Mindful Minute Conversation series. So we are the Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals. And we're doing this Mindful Minute Conversation series that we started about a year ago this time. So what we do with this conversation series is focus on promoting the emotional wellness of the Black community through engaging and educational content. So what we hope to do today and in future conversations is to provide practical tips, tools, and techniques for navigating the stress of this ongoing pandemic of not just COVID-19, but ongoing systemic racism, and then address other topics like relationships and other topics that are relevant to the Black community. So today we're talking about stress management for educators during the pandemic. And we have with us our three panelists. We have Ms. Regina Hunt, Dr. Karen Moore, and Ms. Kimberly Lawrence. So if you all could please introduce yourself, and if we could start with Ms. Hunt, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Regina Hunt. I'm a licensed psychological examiner, and currently I work with Pulaski County Special School District as a psychological examiner through the Special Education Department. I have a master's degree in counseling and psychology from the University of Central Arkansas. And the bulk of my work, both in the clinical setting and of course in schools, is working with children. That's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hunt. Dr. Moore.
Look, I had to put my glasses on to find the mute button. Okay, so I'm Dr. Karen Moore, and I am a licensed psychologist. I own a private practice, Stillwater's Consulting Group, and I am a school psychologist by training, though. But during my training at the University of Missouri, I stepped into a lot of other places and got some experience with family therapy, working with the co-developer of multi-systemic therapy, and then did a lot of work with families through that, doing in-home family therapy for kids who are affiliated with the juvenile justice system. And then I got other experience working in private practice here in Arkansas. This is home, so glad to join this wonderful panel and do things like this for my community.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Dr. Moore. Ms. Lawrence.
Hello, my name is Kim Lawrence, and I am also a licensed psychological examiner. Same background as Ms. Hunt, currently working in the Little Rock School District under the umbrella of special education. Been in the school setting for the past 9 years, but prior to that, I was in the clinical setting as an outpatient mental health therapist, working with children and adults, doing individual therapy, group therapy. Currently do some contract work on the side with a local adult children and adolescent psychiatric hospital, mostly testing and things like that. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. So as you all can tell, we have some wonderful panelists here with us today who have experience in, knowledge with, of course, children and youth, but also our school setting. So as we know, I'm just going to bring us to our topic here today. As we know, we've been in this pandemic and been dealing with this. I think definitely from a school perspective, I think it's almost been a year exactly. I was thinking about that earlier, about what, March 12th? Some schools it may be different. 12th, March 12th was it, right? March 12th, 2020. So that's when a lot of things change for us, particularly here in Arkansas and with some of our schools and school districts. And so we know that since then, our educators, our teachers, our administrators, school personnel have probably had struggles, obviously, not just probably, have had struggles, have had stress from different places. So if you all could just talk to us about that before we get into the tips and strategies, if you all could give your perspective on what the unique challenges are. We know a lot of people, right? A lot of people in a lot of industries, very stressed, very overwhelmed, limited capacity in this past year. But I do think is a unique conversation to have about our educators and our school personnel, right? So if you all could each give your perspective on what are those unique challenges, what have you been seeing with our teachers, educators, and school personnel? Ms. Hunt, if we could start with you.
Yes. I currently work in 3 elementary schools within the Pulaski County School District that have very different demographics. And one school that I work in has a high level of Spanish speaking students. And the other school is a larger, that's a small school. The other one is a larger school. And then I have another smaller school that just has a mixture of students as well. The biggest challenges I see for teachers and the ones that I've interacted with is they talk about the fatigue. When you have teachers who are virtual teachers, they are hooked into a computer virtually all day long in a room by themselves, but they are talking with students online. And I know for some that's been a struggle. In terms of service delivery to their students, particularly those who are virtual, is a big challenge because you don't always have control over that learning environment. And many of them are concerned about their students in terms of what they're learning. Are they learning? Are they picking up the skills? I see also teachers who feel burnt out and overwhelmed with the responsibilities and tasks that they have before them because they're having to prepare for traditional students and virtual students and blended students. Um, some I see quite a bit of anxiety overall with the mask and concerns about getting COVID themselves. And I think it's been helpful that we've been able to get the vaccines for that population. Um, I just, it's pretty overwhelming for everybody from administrators all the way down. But those people who are in the trenches are the ones that I see who are stressed the most, um, trying to provide.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've talked about fatigue, burnout, anxiety. Yeah, yeah. That's important to be mindful of. How about others? What else are you all seeing? Dr. Moore, what have you been hearing? What have you been seeing?
Um, Very similar to Ms. Hunt, what she has been seeing. That was actually the first thing that I listed, even in private practice. So with my experience with the consulting with various schools and in private practice, I think the most common issue is compassion fatigue. And so I'm glad that Ms. Hunt kind of brought that up, and then she also brought up burnout. So I want to talk about those two just briefly. So the fatigue comes from working with, they're helping professionals, right? In a sense. So they're helping these kids learn, but these kids do not live in a bubble. So they're not totally isolated from what's going on in their communities, at home, and not to mention school. So some of these kids are still going through quite a bit. And not only are they dealing with the managing the school environment in the midst of a pandemic, but they're also trying to help so desperately these kids who are just facing traumatic event after traumatic event. And so, not to mention burnout for some, even the newer teachers that I've come across, right? And the burnout is tends to be over time, but it's, I don't know what kind of time zone we in with this virus, but it's like it's an accelerated plus like double, like it's exponential and accelerated. So all the stress that would have came maybe over a 3 to 5 year period is it's being felt within the first 1 to 2 years. And even research says that, that is something to look out for. So not only do you have like kind of burnout issues with all they still have these responsibilities. And even at my daughter's school, teachers are responsible for not only in-seat kids, but the same teacher is also responsible at the same time for virtual kids too. So they still have these responsibilities in addition to helping their students. And we ain't mentioned themselves, right? We haven't mentioned the teacher and their own issues. So it's a lot. It is. So I try to put a name to it so they'll know that it's not just them. And so they can be able to kind of I try to normalize what they're feeling, and so they'll be able to understand what's going on before we get into the tips.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because that's right. We're going to spend the majority of the time focusing on tips. So for those who are watching either on Facebook Live or on here on Zoom, feel free to put comments and questions so we can kind of address your questions as we go throughout. What I feel like, Dr. Moore, you kind of highlighted was just this compounding stress that really a lot of the teachers and educators are experiencing from multiple different directions, and compounded in such a way where they're experiencing a lot of, like, the degree of stress that you would expect over years. They're really experiencing that all in 1 year at one time, which is just hard to imagine there. Ms. Lawrence, if you could help us, what else are you seeing?
Pretty much the same, that they mentioned. I definitely see teachers are being pulled in 17 different directions. And they signed up to be teachers to teach kids and to help kids.
Right.
And with this pandemic, I noticed teachers are not being able to connect with kids like they would typically be able to. Teachers are having to be more flexible and adapt, to just an ever-changing situation, which is going to subsequently lead to that anxiety and stress and things like that. And then keeping, I'm at an elementary school and high school. At the high school level, I see particularly keeping kids engaged, and motivated, especially the older, the students become. That just presents a whole nother level of challenges. And then when you think about, I think Ms. Hunt mentioned, being teachers worried about getting COVID themselves, or, the health risk themselves. Well, it's difficult when you're dealing with older students who may not keep their mask up, or who don't social distance and things like that.
Yeah, I appreciate you offering insight into that, because of what you made me kind of think of is also when I do some work with some of the teachers and educators, and one of the things I hear a lot of is kind of what they find rewarding. So that's what I was thinking as you were talking, Ms. Lawrence, that the connection that they get, maybe if they get some sort of satisfaction and fulfillment, certainly from knowing that the kids are learning, that they're imparting knowledge into them, they're connecting with them. What I'm hearing you all say is teachers are maybe not getting the opportunity to feel that sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and reward as they would before, when maybe it was more opportunity to connect, more opportunity.
Right. But I would
make it. I think they're faking it till they make it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we have to also be mindful of is, if we remember that schools closed, as you said, a year ago, almost a year ago. I think the last day for students was March 12th last year. And what has happened is they provided services that semester. And then when we came back, for like individuals like Kim and myself, we had students who, because of the virtual situation, who were signed up for evaluations that were not completed. And so when we came back to school, we came back with a whole, virtually a year's worth of work to finish in one semester, because you had the carryover from the spring, and then you had those things in the fall that came up in the fall semester. And so, and what I see with a lot of teachers also is that they want their students to get it. I mean, they are compassionate and about what they do and about teaching. But a lot of times, particularly with students on the virtual platform, the teacher is not in control of that environment at all. And I just remember one day we had a teacher, and I'm not going to belabor this point. I had a teacher, I was walking down the hall, and she came running out of her room. And what was happening is she had a student who was on virtually, and the student's mother and her partner were fighting. and the student was just crying and screaming on the platform while she was on the platform. So that was an emergency situation, and that teacher felt so helpless to try to do anything. I don't know that we've had that many situations that were that severe, but those things do happen. And so we're asking them to wear multiple hats as well. And that just brings up a whole nother level of stress.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Those are tough situations. Absolutely. Where teachers are feeling like they don't have any control. They can't be as helpful to students, especially their virtual students.
And what it's doing, honestly, when Ms. Hunt brought that up, typically, I mean, traditionally, you take your child to school, right? And unless there's something obvious going on that would raise suspicion, teachers don't always know what's going on in the home, going on in the home environment. And with this whole virtual situation, it's exposing a lot, more than would typically be exposed.
Right, right. So, and I think you raised a good point, and one of our viewers had a question regarding this, is I wonder if what's being exposed or even compounded even more are students who are having mental health crises. We know that this is a collective trauma that we're all in right now, and teachers are kind of maybe seeing some of this firsthand, seeing students who are struggling with the death of family members, students are feeling disconnected and lonely, having more suicidal thinking, having all of these experiences, as Dr. Moore mentioned earlier, who are being exposed to and impacted by trauma. How is this impacting the teacher, you think? Dr. Moore, you mentioned earlier about kids exposed to trauma. What's your sense of how that might be impacting the teachers who are seeing this?
Right. And I guess just like Ms. Lawrence was saying, that the virtual avenue, the way that we're teaching now, it gives them a window that they once did not have. And they maybe relied on reports or, self-disclosure and things like that from from kids or something like that. But it just goes back to the term, and this comes from and I'll make sure I'll list this as a resource, the American Institute of Stress. Another word for compassion fatigue is the vicarious traumatization. So it's almost like they're actually living through this trauma that the kids are experiencing right there with them. Like
Right.
it could have been traumatic for that teacher, as Ms. Hunt was saying, that came out. I don't know. I wouldn't know what to say or what to do at that moment after giving over the initial shock, maybe. But I mean, that would have thinking about, oh my gosh, that baby's right there. What do I do? So I think a lot of teachers and even the administrators and staffs in school who are doing things virtually now are maybe at a loss, which I'm so glad that we're doing this, as to what she probably didn't know what to do. So I'm finding that they may have questions. Well, what am I obligated to do legally? You're still a mandated reporter, this and this, but how do I link the family up with resources or things like that? So we have conversations about the legal and even ethical responsibilities that they share. And then once that's taken care of, I then focus on them, because I mean, at the end of the day, they still experience those sort of things in the moment. So I'm finding that they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I've noticed an increase in depression, with students, especially when you get into older students who aren't able to be as social, because you're having to be at home, even though now we're getting more into, they're having athletic events and things like that. But when you go back to the beginning, when everything was shut down, that took a toll on a lot of students. But here recently, we had a situation right when the snowstorm hit where a student who was virtual wrote a suicide note. And another student, I'm not sure how the other student became aware of it, but passed it on to school staff. Now, all the while, the student is at home, And so my advice was to the school, we'll send your local police over for a welfare check. you know, because it was to a point where if they were in school, then we would maybe consider, you know, getting consent for a mobile assessment if a student's expressing suicidal ideation and things like that. But when you can't get to a student because they're at home and they are you know, you have proof they are claiming to be suicidal, they've written a note. First things first, ideally you would want them mobilely assessed. You want to make contact with the parent, but I said you can never go wrong with calling, you know, your local police department. Hey, could you please go over and do a welfare check? And to me, that's a unique situation, you know, because as you can't get to the student, but in this particular situation, the parents wanted to take the student to their pastor to pray for him. You know, they kind of were in denial about the no and the child being suicidal. But like I told school staff, you still have a duty and you're mandated, you know, to address this situation. And in that situation, there was no way the parent was going to give consent for mobile assessment. They weren't going to take the student to the hospital. Now we have a note, you know. And so when we returned to school following the big snowstorm, it was on the social worker to follow up, you know, with that family. You know, I think police did go out and do a welfare check, but documentation is always great as well. You know, come up with a safety plan. If your school does have a social worker, if your district has a social worker, so there's not one in every school, connect with them. And this is for teachers, you know, if you have situations like that, connect with someone who can advise you in that regard. So
Right.
Yeah.
In our situation, we did exactly what Kim said. We contacted, the mother wasn't available because she was in this fight and the children were hiding in the closet, but she had the presence of mind to talk to her teacher. And we were able to keep her on the line long enough we called local law enforcement. And because this student was a unique student for that particular school, our security guard and the classroom teacher went to the home while the rest of us, I kept the child on the phone, on the line, until they were able to get there and see about the child, because you didn't really just want the police to show up in the middle of that situation without someone being there that the child was familiar with or what have you. And so it all worked out. The other thing I wanted to just say before we got off the unique challenges is the other thing that I'm seeing is a lot of teachers resigning and just getting out of the profession altogether because of what's been going on over the last year with all of the pandemic things and just the stress of trying to hold down everything. I've seen quite a bit of that as well.
I have to.
I appreciate you all sharing that, because basically I feel like what you all are talking about is all of this stress, fatigue, compassion fatigue. And I appreciate, Dr. Moore, you add in other language of vicarious trauma. And then I want to add to that, just very similar to vicarious trauma, is secondary traumatic stress. And I think we have to look at that to kind of say, not only is it stress, fatigue, compassion fatigue, burnout, anxiety, and feeling overwhelmed, but literally in situations like you mentioned, Ms. Lawrence and Ms. Hunt, these situations where teachers are really witness to these adverse experiences, right? These traumas, these very scary experiences that children are having, and that can impact the teachers in the same way that the trauma is impacting the child, like literally it affecting their sleep, affecting their energy level, affecting their ability to focus, that they're even having a trauma reaction of sorts. So if we could maybe kind of maybe make that a segue, if we could, over into what can teachers do? So let's even focus on that for teachers who are feeling maybe helpless, feeling like they can't help their students as much as they want, be it help them academically, help them emotionally, with whatever their difficulties are. How can teachers kind of cope with that, particularly where it's stuff that's beyond and outside of their control? Whoever kind of wants to jump in with that.
Well, I think it's important for teachers to have a support system. One of the things that's really hard for teachers right now is that, you know, you may have had a group that ate lunch together and all of those things, and because of social distancing, they cannot do that. but I think is ultimately, I mean, just very, very important that they have a support system within the group, within that school building that they can go to and talk to, either, even if they have to do it virtually on their phones or what have you, when they are feeling overwhelmed. I think too, the other thing is, you know, as people who provide services and we're like caregivers and in those helping professions, we always want to fix it. And one of the things that I think they can do is recognize too that everything that comes up, that they don't have control over that, but it doesn't mean that they're inadequate. It doesn't mean that they're ineffective. There are just things in life that are well beyond their control, and they are empowered to do what you can when you can, but not to take onus of all of the problems that are going on with their students or even within the building. I think that is very, very important.
I would add to that, you know, take time off when needed. You know, don't
Mhm.
feel like you have to be at school every day. If you need to take a mental health day, you know, I know in my district they have, they've implemented virtual Fridays where there are no students, you know, take advantage of that. If you know, need to take a day, take time off when needed. Um, Another practical things that teachers could do is, you know, during your prep time, you know, if weather permitting, walk outside, you know, walk around the
Yeah.
building, get out of the classroom. There are meditation apps that you can download on your phone. Maybe just take 5 minutes to, you know, just kind of reset, um, listening to some type of meditation, something along those lines. I agree with what Ms. Hunt said, you know, talk to your teacher friends, you know, because you'll be surprised, you know, how many of you are experiencing the same thing.
Mhm.
And just to add on to what the other ladies have said so far, what I try to do is deal with the kind of thinking process associated with some of the, I guess, the feelings of being ineffective. They feel less than efficacious than in the past. So I try to deal with the thought processes that the educators and maybe staff are having to create kind of realistic expectations. And so I point out that it's kind of hard to hold yourself to the same standards that you once had for yourself when you're in totally different circumstances. So if you had to make adjustments based on your current circumstances, you forgot to make adjustments to the expectations for your performance in these new circumstances. And then that kind of helps. Oh my gosh, you're right. So I literally was holding myself to this high unachievable standard, thinking that we were in the best situation possible, but we're not. So once I kind of point out some of the kind of erroneous way of perceiving their situation, I can help them to kind of create more reasonable expectations for themselves. Another thing that I kind of do is that people, and even was guilty of this, I was resistant to this idea of self-care. And when I did think about self-care, I thought about this pedicure. Well, I don't know if I want to be in a salon with a bunch of people right now. So, I mean, but that's if that was the only way to care for myself. So once I broke down, okay, self-care is not synonymous with being selfish. Caring for oneself. So I came up with my own definition. It's the thoughts. It's even your thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that focus on preserving and enhancing your well-being. And here's the number one: your energy and something you will never get back, time. So how do I do that? I do that in multiple ways, whether it's from boundaries and all different types of relationships with your children, your boss, your colleague, your friends. I had a very difficult time saying no. I'm really good at it now. It hurts, but I have a limited capacity. I had to do a lot of self-reflection. And that's what I help a lot of educators and staff members do some reflection to see what that capacity is and then hold true to that, because that's all you can do. But what if you need to do more, right? So that means align yourself, which is what I've done, right? I've aligned myself to other professionals who are like-minded, who care about these babies just as much as I do, because I realize I can't do it all by myself. But as a village, we can get a lot more accomplished. So align yourself with others who are like-minded and lean on that social support system. So if you don't have one, create one. And it may be, you know, I think people are in our lives for various reasons and seasons. And so be willing to receive that. Maybe that's the season for that person to be there. They're there when they need to be. So just being flexible.
I think to add on to what Dr. Moore was saying, you know, when implementing those things and when that doesn't work, you know, it's like, how do I know when I need to seek professional help? You know, when your job or, you know, when these stressors are starting to impact your relationships, you know, impacting your functioning in multiple areas of your life, then you may, you know, want to seek professional help. And I was reminded that currently AR benefits, the health plan for teachers is currently waiving the copay. So
Yes.
for services.
And
Just to add to
piggyback on
that,
the insurance, I'm sorry, Ms. Hunt, just to piggyback on the insurance, a lot of insurance companies are waiving the cost sharing portion for our clients at this time. So whatever your insurance is, or a lot of people aren't even having to contribute to their deductibles. So there's still a lot of insurance companies are doing that. So check with your insurance carrier to see what they're doing for you during the, and usually if you do the sessions virtually, they cover it. So some people may have, if you go in person sessions, your copay or deductible kicks in. But if it's virtual, they'll usually cover it. That's from the private practice side. Sorry, Ms. Hunt.
oh, no problem at all. I was just going to add to what they're saying. As I was contemplating and thinking about what kinds of things would I say, in addition to getting a support system and considering those things that you need to do for yourself, I also thought about the spiritual aspect of the self-care. That a lot of times, you know, when we get weary, we don't stop to think about that. If you are a person of faith, spend some time reading the scripture or listening to music to meditate on some spiritual music. Also, there are other things that are really important. Getting good rest. And for a lot of teachers, I'm just amazed that they're spending hours and hours at home. They were doing this before the pandemic, but I think it's gotten a lot worse where they're spending so many hours at home, taking away family time and just their own ability to relax because they have so much to do. So setting boundaries is very important. Developing, you know, just as much as you can, a routine that you have certain times that you can do things. And I know that can be difficult sometimes, but just taking care of those kinds of things and remembering that you're human, and that you deserve the same level of compassion that you're sharing, that you have for your students, that you deserve that same thing yourself. And it's not, as Dr. Moore said, it's not about being selfish. It's about persevering through a very stressful time. And, you know, there are a lot of just small things I think that we don't think about. A lot of times in the school setting, we're going so fast because you only have so many hours in that day. It's not a regular 8 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 necessarily day. So we're rushing. A lot of times teachers don't take the time to eat lunch, or they eat lunch on the go. I read an article several years ago about women educators and how the incident of kidney problems and bladder issues for them as they got older is because they're in the classroom all day and they only have these small windows of time to take care of their own personal needs, like personal needs. And just ask someone, hey, I need to do this. Can you watch my class? Or however you can arrange that. But that's very important. Eating well is in walking, going to get a pedicure or manicure if you can. If you're very fortunate, if you can have someone come to your home that you trust to do that, have them come to your home, get a massage. Those are just really easy things to do.
Yeah. I just want, if I could just recap a little bit of what you all are saying, because you all are all providing some awesome tips and practical tips. So I just want to recap some of that so all our listeners hear it. And for people who go back and watch the replay, they hear these wonderful tips you all are sharing. So what you all collectively have kind of shared, I feel like one major thing you all are sharing is how people can take care of their body in order to take care of their mind. So I think that's so critical. So you mentioned, Ms. Hunt, the idea of getting adequate rest. And when we think about adequate rest, I think we're talking about what, about 8 or 9 hours if we can do it, but at least 7. At least people can pull off 7. So adequate rest. You talked about exercise. I believe, Ms. Lawrence, you mentioned that even if they could just take a walk during the day on a break, just something where they're getting physical movement and activity, and then also balanced eating. So I just want to highlight that for the listeners, that we know that take care of your body. If there's any kind of physical conditions or medical conditions that you have, take care of that. Do things to take care of your body, and that's a part of just the daily regimen of self-care. Self-care is just not something we do every once in a while, but it's a daily routine. So I appreciate you all talking about routines, talking about a network. So people getting a support network. You mentioned mental health days. So I don't know if some of our administrators are on, but some of what you're talking about, hopefully the school system and the district create policies and processes to allow for some of this. So we hope that there are policies and processes in place where that allows teachers to have these breaks and these times, even during the day, to take care of themselves. You all mentioned meditation apps. I wonder if we could have something pretty direct about that. Any meditation apps that you all know about? As you all are thinking, just one I'm going to just share is Abide. Abide is an app, and I just want to mention that because that blends the spirituality piece that Ms. Hunt mentioned in a meditation. So ABIDE, Abide, is definitely an app it is a Christian-based app, but it provides a lot of ways that people can have brief moments of mindfulness and meditation. What about other apps that people?
Headspace. It's
Yeah.
called Headspace. It's a meditation mindfulness app, and it's free for educators.
Okay. And I think Dr. Moore, you had another one that you maybe wanted to share.
Calm.
Okay.
Calm is one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have Headspace, Calm, CALM, Calm. Yeah, these are great out there. And I think they have, I mean, you can certainly pay, but I think they have a free version where you can still access some of it. Okay.
And then here recently, my little 9-year-old, as of yesterday, turned me on to these frequency videos on YouTube. And so they are supposed to, I had trouble sleeping a couple of nights, put that on, and believe it or not, this video is like 5 hours long. I never made it to the end. So I think there's some research, though it may be preliminary, of how these sounds are supposed to be spiritually oriented and induce a way of maybe euphoria, alleviate anxiety, depression, things like that. So people may be open to that kind of experience as well.
So I like how you say that YouTube has a lot on there. They may have different kind of guided meditations, imagery, sounds. So a lot of people can do things where they soothe with their senses. And this meaning that they can look at things, listen to things, have in some way where they engage their senses in a way that soothes and calms them. So, and these are things that people can hopefully incorporate into their routine very quickly, right? If you download these apps, you can have like 2 to 5 minutes even during the day, in the morning or at night, to just be calm, be still your mind, still your body in a way that could be relaxing.
And be present, focused. That's part of the whole mindfulness movement, is I always try to teach individuals where the anxiety and depression lies. And it's hardly ever present focus, hardly ever. So if you can remind yourself just to be in the moment and to find balance and stay centered, that can help too.
Right.
There's also another app that I use sometimes. It's called Relax Melodies. And it's a free app as well, that I use. And it has the music and the different sounds of nature and things like that on it. I use that sometimes.
Right. I think that that's great. Thanks for offering those apps. And I'm pretty sure there's so many out there, but hopefully this gives people somewhere to kind of start. And I like how Dr. Moore is saying, when you do these things, be sure that during that time, be present, focused. So especially if it was a hard day where it was feeling that helpless feeling, where it was maybe a child who was virtual that you felt like I couldn't connect, couldn't help them as much as I wanted to. And so what I want to highlight with that is how teachers, I think you said it earlier, Ms. Hunt, in those moments can really focus on what can I control? What is within my control? What is in my realm of doing something about it? So it seems like you all did that. You engaged the proper procedures to get people involved to handle that. But then after you've done all you can do, it's like, then how can you then kind of go and be in a present moment and then do what you need to do to refuel and recharge? And I hope that these are some tools that people can use to kind of say, okay, how can I be in the moment, not reviewing and continuing to repeat all of what happened throughout the day or even worrying about tomorrow, but being in that moment. So I appreciate that language that you provided there, Dr. Moore, being present focused. If we could kind of, it may be some other tips you all want to provide. So I want to continue to talk some about this, but if we could kind of go back to a point, Dr. Moore, you mentioned earlier about healthy ways of thinking. If we could kind of hang out there for a while, what are some healthy ways of thinking? I know some people call them affirmations, some people call them mantras, but what are some things that you all could put out there that if a teacher is trying to put themselves in a healthy thought space, what can they kind of say to themselves over and over to stay kind of healthy and well?
What I recommend is if you prefer not to go into Walmart, and I don't blame you, do a pickup order. I'll try to get $35 so it'll be free. But or Kroger or somewhere, you just get you a little Post-it note, 88 cents or something like that. And I do it myself. I write, I'm limitless. So I'm strong, I'm loved, I'm needed. So I say it in a positive, affirmative manner. Like, I'm not this. I don't put the word not or none or don't. Any of that does not appear on these Post-it notes. I'm already kind of manifesting, speaking positivity out into the house, and it trickles down to my baby. So we can all try to stay in a positive kind of mind space and energy. So, and I tell people, you may not even be there. You may not even believe the first day, week, even month, what you actually write on that Post-it note. But that's okay. You keep saying it anyway until it sinks in, and it does resonate in your spirit or in your head, where you can't help but change your emotions and behaviors when you renew the way you think. And so that's why I spend some time there helping people to begin to speak positivity over themselves.
I love it.
Sound like I'm in church, but it's I know, my bad.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Because I think it still applies, whether it's through a spiritual or religious lens, or even through in whatever way. I think whatever way, we know that what we think about and what we say is going to impact how we feel.
Right.
Go ahead. I know Ms. Lawrence, you were going to share.
Well, I was going to say, Dr. Moore, then the last segment hit the nail right on the head, but she just expounded even more on what she was saying. But I agree, you have to sometimes put it into action, and you may not believe it at first, but reread it, like personally, I'm kind of like Dr. Moore. I have to remind myself sometimes as well, and there are just two quotes that I keep as a screen, as now a widget on my phone. Two quotes. One is, stop being afraid of what could go wrong and think of what could go right. Mm-hmm. And anytime I find myself being stressed, overwhelmed, I read that, and it's been on there for months. And the other one is, when you reach the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. And honestly, those two things is But it goes in line with what Dr. Moore was saying, you know, writing things down, sticking putting Post-it notes around. But I know I'm gonna have my phone in hand most of the time. And
Mhm.
so but just reminding yourself, you know, those positive affirmations for sure. People be surprised, you know, how that can just reframe your thought, even for just a second. I'm
Right.
not saying you're not gonna get stressed again, but to reframe your thought for even just a second can be helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's important to think about those affirmations. One of the things I know in 12-step programs, they use the serenity prayer a lot. And it's basically, right now, I can't think of the whole thing right off the top of my head, but basically it's saying, asking God to give you the wisdom, the strength to do the things you can, the knowledge to understand what you cannot do, and the wisdom to know the difference between those.
Mhm.
And that's very important as well. And I also am reminded of a scripture in the Bible. It says, call those things that are not as though they were. It may not be the exact quote, but it's,
Got it.
we're saying, we're speaking into our lives and into our, you know, whoever, when we're encouraging a student or a coworker or whatever, is encouraging them and to continue to speak those affirmations and recognize any of us in any given moment, you know, can feel like, oh, we're just not getting it, we're not making it. But that's not true. We're this one year does not define who you are.
Mhm.
It does not define who you are striving to be. And so give yourself permission to be human in this pandemic and continue to think about all of the things in your life that you have done that were right, things that you worried about and you stressed over. And this helps me a lot when I'm worried and stressed over something and then I go through it and it turns out okay. It's like, okay, you can do this. You can do this. And I think those things are important. Kim mentioned something too about, and Dr. Moore, about seeking professional help. And I think sometimes we kind of put that on the back burner, um, to, oh, I don't really need to see someone. I don't need to do this for whatever the reason is. But that is very important for us. If we are in the business of helping individuals, and particularly as school systems, teachers, and folks that work within that system, if we're asking, when you have a student who doesn't understand a certain concept or they're not grasping new material, what do? We go in there and we work with them until we get it. You are their therapist for their academic skills and developing their character and all of that. And just remember that there are people out there who can help us when we are struggling with things, and it's not anything to be embarrassed about or feel like you're a failure because you need that. It is something that we can actually do to help ourselves.
Right.
And if I can just have one more thought on that, and I'm so glad you said that, Ms. Hunt. I've been recently, I've been thrilled with the number of people who are entering mental health services for the first time. Like I do jazz hands and everything. If I'm like, I'm your first day, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So I mean, we almost throw a party, baby. I'm just so excited that more and more people are seeking help. But for those individuals who are just maybe on the fence, I always like, if it's warranted, and I'm led by my spirit, but I like to reveal that even I have sought someone to talk to. I mean, even the helper needs someone to talk to at some time. Like, how do you think I'm able to handle all the stuff that comes on my way? I realize I can't do it all, and I'm not alone, and I don't have to be alone. So I encourage people to realize that we are placed here to help one another, and they aren't alone in going through this stuff.
And that kind of goes with, you can't get water from an empty well, you know? And so everybody, especially whether it's in our profession or especially educators, because educators wear so many hats. even under normal circumstances. You, the teacher, they the therapist, you can sometimes be the social worker, you the nurse. Educators wear so many different hats. And so then you add on the stress of a pandemic, really. Oh, you definitely are going on E, you know? And so, and even particularly for the African American community, you know, mental health services is not something that we just jumping at, you know? And so, and it's good to, and that's one thing I like about this organization, getting out there and kind of normalizing, you know, a lot of these issues and topics, and letting people know it's okay to seek help. And like Dr. Moore pointed out earlier, now you can do it incognito because you can do it virtual from your own home, you know? But the point of me saying all that is don't be afraid to seek out, because you definitely cannot get water from an empty well.
Right. Oh, I appreciate you all sharing that and highlighting the benefits that can come from people seeking mental health treatment. So I do want to just have a plug here that the Arkansas Association of Black Psychology Professionals, we are continuing to develop our directory that includes a list of Black mental health professionals in the state of Arkansas. So of course you could always reach out to your insurance company. You could, some individuals may have employee assistance programs, EAPs. Some people may talk to their PCP about getting a referral. So those are definitely ways that you can get referrals, but feel free to contact us through Facebook if you would like. We have some names, it's not an exhaustive list, but we do have some names where we will try our best to get you the name of a mental health professional who can be of assistance to you. So please do that if needed. You all have provided some wonderful tips. I just want to go back and highlight a few. So I'm hoping people heard some of the wonderful affirmations, mantras, scriptures that have been provided that people can say to themselves. Just kind of get started with it and start saying things to themselves on a regular basis, repeating it. And like you're saying, even if you don't believe it, like I said, call those things that be not as though they are. Just calling it and saying it as if it is true, and then really believing it and growing in that, because of course we know the more we hear it, the more we really can believe it, and it gets down deep on the inside of us. So please, that's something that we can get started now immediately. Somebody mentioned earlier about boundaries. I just want to highlight that again, because that's something immediately that can be put in place, is to really have that clear wisdom. I know Ms. Hunt mentioned that earlier, having wisdom to kind of know, okay, what do we need to say yes to? What is in our control? What can we say no to really understanding what are my boundaries? What are my boundaries with time? I know we talk a lot to teachers about when you go home, if it's possible, just go ahead and turn that off and then really fully be present in the moment with your families. So if there's a way to really, even if it means, I know one of the things I've done before is literally using, what is it, the scrub, the soap scrub that you could just kind of use, and using it on my hands, but being this process that I'm just kind of cleansing from the day, and then I'm going to transition over and be present in this evening. And so for people, that's people have their ways where they really transition and move over to being present with their families and so forth after work. So it's a way that you put boundaries around your time, boundaries around kind of what you're doing at work versus at home. Yeah. I just want to see if anybody had other stuff to share, and can kind of tell on your faces if there's other things you want to share.
Well, I did.
Go ahead,
just really quick. There is a whole and there may be kind of a religious tone to some of the things that we're saying, and if it resonates with you, awesome. If it doesn't, if you're more spiritual, I hope some of this resonates with you as well. But if you're not, there's still, if you don't subscribe to any sort of religion, or you feel like you're not spiritual, there's still room for you to hear. There's a whole body of positive psychology, right? That there's research and science behind this stuff. So even though I'm saying this, but I got research to back it up to what we're talking about. So this, right. the kind of affirmations and the positive thinking, changing the way you think and perceive, and it can change your behavior and emotions. It doesn't necessarily. So I'm trying to reach multiple people, just right. Don't feel like you have to subscribe to one way or another. And then last name, embrace your failures. And I've been on this kick since 2021. I've been asking people to embrace their failures. There's this Black author who wrote Rise, R-I-S-E, and it's a bunch of little stories about how archers, I mean, literally shoot about maybe 500 arrows, one hits. Why do they continue to shoot 500 and only one bullseye, right? So they're learning, and there's so much that goes into it. It was very interesting to me what goes into learning how to. I've never been able to hit the bullseye. So, but anyway, it's just the thought of continuing to persevere and learn from these failures, right? And that used to scare people, right? Like I feel if they come see a psychologist or they come see a therapist, they're failing, right? Or I'm not reaching all my students, I'm failing, right? But I say embrace that. Learn from it. We learn everything in life is a lesson. We learn from our successes and our mistakes and our failures. And so that makes us all of that combined and amongst a bunch of other stuff makes us who we are. So don't shy away from that, and don't feel like that you should shun yourself just because you make mistakes. And then I'm done.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask for closing remarks, but that definitely is that. That's definitely awesome, Dr. Moore. Thank you for adding that, because I think that's part of what we've been saying. That's part of our being human, our personhood, is to be able to embrace the part that our failures, our mistakes, hopefully learn from it, and just have a balanced way of seeing that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Other closing remarks from Ms. Honey?
The one thing I wanted to say was, I think Dr. Moore may have mentioned this, but I had written this down in my notes. When we're talking about self-care, there's sometimes when we're doing things for ourselves, we have a tendency to feel guilty about doing certain things. And so one of the quotes that I saw as I was reading through and it really resonated with me is, self-care is not self-indulgence, but self-preservation.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
I
not
want to leave.
self-indulgence, but self-preservation. Wonderful.
Something I was going to say, and I saw it in the chat, but I literally had wrote this down earlier, was grace. And even for other people that's watching, that's not an educator, give your educators grace. Say thank you. You know, that can go a long way. But then also for us to extend ourselves grace, because I like what Dr. Moore said earlier. You got expectations for a situation you ain't none of us ever been in before in our life. So adjust, adapt, give yourself grace.
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. You have provided some rich information that help us to understand what educators, teachers, school personnel are going through, but then also some very practical tips that can help people with what they do every day, how they think, and how they conduct their lives in a way that hopefully would help them to still be as fulfilled and hopefully as satisfied by their teaching experience as possible. So we thank you all for being here, and we hope that people can continue to watch the replay and continue to be blessed and encouraged and hopefully strengthened by what's been shared here today. Just as we wrap up, I know we're at our hour, but I want to be sure our listening audience knows about what we have coming up with our Mindful Minute Conversation series. So in April, we're going to talk about the power of spirituality for coping. Even though we've talked about some spirituality today, but we're going to focus on it next month, and we're going to talk about spirituality from several different perspectives. All right, we're going to have different perspectives that we address, but the power of spirituality for coping during the pandemic. That's going to be April 5th. That's going to be our Facebook Live, the first Monday of the month in April. And then the first Monday in May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're just going to be addressing a range of topics. We're going to kind of have a Ask the Mental Health Professional kind of format where hopefully we're able to address a range of topics related to mental health and emotional wellness that we're seeing during this pandemic and just during this time in general. So please continue to join us for our Facebook Lives, the first Monday of every month. Thank you all. Thank you all panelists again for being here. We appreciate you sharing your expertise and your time with us. Thank you so very much.
And thank you for asking and having us.
Absolutely.